Hello, this is Dr. Lori. Welcome to this video on how to calculate an odds ratio. For this example, I am going to calculate the odds ratio two different ways so that you can see it both directions, and we're going to use this example over here on the right. So it says an investigator wanted to determine whether vitamin deficiency was associated with birth defects. By reviewing the birth certificates during a single year in a large U.S. county, the researcher located 189 infants born with neural tube defects. So right away, we know that our outcome that we're thinking about is neural tube defects, and our exposure is vitamin deficiency. So I'm going to say vitamin deficiency here. Yes, no. And neural tube defects are our cases. That's supposed to be an N. A total of 600 other births were selected at random from the certificate. So this is birth certificate data. Mothers were given a dietary questionnaire. Among mothers who gave birth to an infant with a neural tube defect, 84 reported no use of supplementary vitamins, and so those are the ones who were considered vitamin deficient. And a total of 137 control mothers did not use vitamin supplements. So our task is to construct the 2x2 table and then calculate the odds ratio between vitamin use and neural tube defects. So it's kind of interesting. They keep flip-flopping between vitamin deficiency as an exposure and vitamin use. And so those would be considered opposite, and that's the reason why I'm going to show you this in two different ways. So the first thing to remember is that as we are doing a case control study, we start off with the total number of cases and controls, and so that goes right here in this table. The total number of cases is 189. And so it's a little different than doing a cohort study where you start off knowing the exposure. So we're gonna have the total cases and then the total controls, which are 600. Move it over a little bit. And then what they tell us is that a certain number of them are presumably vitamin deficient because they did not use supplementary vitamins, and so we'll put those here in this 84 and 137. Now, if all we knew is that we had a bunch of women who did not take vitamins, we would know we had 84 cases and 137 controls. But what we really want to do is we want to compare exposure to vitamin deficiency, yes, in other words, those who did not take multivitamins, to vitamin deficiency, no, and those were the ones who did take a vitamin supplement during pregnancy. So let's go ahead and fill in the other numbers. This would be by subtraction, basically 105. So 84 plus 105 equals 189. And then 137 plus 463 is equal to 600. So as we're calculating this, what you should know is that the odds of being a case for those who are vitamin deficient is right here on the top row. And then the odds of being vitamin deficient for those who took a multivitamin is on the bottom row. So we have a comparison group, and that's really what we're after when we're doing analytic epidemiology. So let's go ahead and fill in our odds. I'm going to show you the calculation. The odds is 84 over 137, which is equal to 0.613. Now, this number in and of itself does not have any specific meaning because it's not like 61% of people who don't take vitamins develop birth defects. There's no denominator data here. So because this is a case control study, we have to be very careful about how we interpret this. Odds, if you remember, the numerator is not included in the denominator. It's just comparing two groups that are separate from each other. So be careful about calling it things like proportion or anything like that, because it really isn't. This is just an odds. So the odds of being a case for those who are vitamin deficient is 0.613, and the odds of being a case for those who are not vitamin deficient is equal to 105 over 463. Oops, I don't know where I'm typing. 463, which is equal to 0.227. Now, what we end up doing is we end up taking a ratio between those two numbers. So 0.613 divided by 0.227 is equal to 2.70, if we can fit that in there. So the odds ratio between those two groups is over 2.5. Now, the interesting thing that happens, as long as the cases are rare, is that the odds ratio gets close to approximating the risk ratio, and so the interpretation does get a little bit easier. I want to do something else, and it's a little difficult to tell based on the way that the question is written, because they use a couple of different terms. They say vitamin deficient versus vitamin use. So I'm going to turn this around and say, take some multivitamin, yes, no. And we're going to do this in reverse. In other words, the top row up here in terms of being vitamin deficient, yes, those are the people who did not take a multivitamin. So they're going to show up on the bottom row here. And what I want you to see is that what we end up with is just the inverse. In other words, if we were to take the inverse of this number right here, then that's what we would end up with in terms of an odds ratio. In other words, taking a multivitamin is protective. So let's go ahead and fill in all of these cells again. Here we're going to have multivitamin yes is going to be 105. The controls are going to be 463 with an odds of 0.227. Cases are 84 and 137 with an odds of 0.613. The totals really are the same, which should make sense, 189 and 600, because that didn't really change. We just literally swapped the rows. And so then the odds ratio is equal to 0.2 over 0.6, which is approximately a third, or 0.370. So if you were to take 1 over 2.70, you would end up with this number right here. That's a 0, not an 8. And so we've really looked at this in two ways. Being vitamin deficient on the top example, having vitamin deficiency is positively associated with neural tube defect. Taking multivitamin use, on the other hand, so here's your multivitamins, is protective, and so the odds ratio is less than 1. So we've looked at that from both different directions. So hopefully from this video you've learned how to both set up a question and calculate the odds, and then calculate the odds ratio. Thank you for joining me.